All right, Thursday night football. Bucs hosting the Atlanta Falcons in their throwback orange uniforms. They haven't had success either on national TV or, for the most part, in those creamsicles, although they did beat Seattle in them, as I recall, this year.
Yes, they did, in the throwback 76 jerseys, because Seattle was wearing them too. So
yeah, those were the white ones. I think they're wearing the orange shirts in this one, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so.
But yeah, so do not adjust your set. You'll get to see the Falcons also wearing red helmets, I think, and black tops or red tops. I don't know. I don't really care what the Falcons wear, to be honest with you. What I do think is interesting is that the immense amount of pressure that's on the Bucs right now to win this game, and of course, on the other side, Raheem Morris is feeling the pressure. I don't know that the players are, but I think we forget it was just a year ago, right? That the Bucs lost twice to the Atlanta Falcons, and quite frankly, they should have lost to them, I think, in the season opener, if not for some, missed kicks and things like that. But Kirk Cousins has long had the Buccaneers' numbers. I mean, I'm going all the way back. He was responsible, really, for the firing of Lovie Smith. If you remember that "You Like It" game, you like that game when he played for the then Washington Redskins, now the Commanders, and they made a big comeback up there in Washington on the Bucs, and that created that meme, that soundbite of him coming in the locker room saying "You like that," and then for him to do what he did just a year ago, his two games against Tampa Bay, he had 400 yards passing in each and 4 touchdowns in each. So it's, I know he's a little less mobile now, or maybe a little older, or maybe not. The one good thing, I guess, if you're the Bucs, is that the Falcons will be without their top receiver, Drake London, which is a help, I think. And the big news, of course, for the Bucs on Wednesday was that both Mike Evans and their other receiver, Jalen McMillan, both taken off injured reserve and activated from injured reserve. Now, they were questionable on the injury report, but one or both could play in this game. I fully expect Mike Evans to play. Less sure about Jalen McMillan, but really, he's the same status as Evans. Todd Bowles said they both look good running around. Neither one, obviously, has taken a hit, but you could have, for the first time this season, what they envisioned at the beginning of the year, which is their top 4 receivers. Obviously, Mike and Jalen, and then Chris Godwin back for his 3rd straight game. And then the immense pressure taken off of Emeka Egbuka, who I think has really felt it of late. So he goes back to not being wide receiver 1. It helps in so many ways with Josh Grizzard, because they know what kind of coverage they're going to get from Mike for the most part. You're going to get double teams. That leaves a lot of one-on-ones across the board. So looking forward to see if all those guys are up and active, and I think they will be, what the possibilities are with Bucky Irving in the backfield. So that'll be fun.
It will be. I mean, for the first time, with the exception of your 2 guards, the whole offense is finally there.
Sure. Yeah.
Now,
Tristan
how
Wirfs
much
is
does
back.
Yeah, how much does Evans play? How much does Godwin play? I mean, Godwin's playing more, but how much will they play? We'll see.
Right.
But you're finally starting to get the weapons back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how healthy is Baker Mayfield is the other question.
Well, and I wrote about that in the Tampa Bay Times and on TampaBay.com, is just sort of, if you kind of look at the way the season has gone, and of course we all remember the 5-1 start and the 4 comebacks, in the final minute, and largely a lot of those were because of Baker. Now, they didn't have their offensive line; they were missing all kinds of guys. Come back in Houston, Gedeke goes down early in that game, and they have to play Charlie Heck. Tristan Wirfs didn't play the first 3 games, so they were winning in that fashion in Atlanta, and so forth without their pieces. And then, when you start to get some offensive linemen back, you would think that would help, and I think it did for the most part. But then the losing happened, both with the schedule getting tougher, and really it's been such an uneven season for Baker, and I think you can trace it to his injuries. I mean, we talked about how he had 16 touchdowns and 2 interceptions to start the season, and since then, in the last 4 games, it's 4 TDs and 4 interceptions. But the injuries kind of parallel the decline of the Bucs during that stretch. He gets knocked out in the Rams game, suffers a sprained shoulder, only plays half of that game, and his production fell off. Even last week, I mean, I know a lot of things were going wrong, and the interception wasn't on him necessarily. The guy kind of broke off his route, but to go 6 for 22 after starting 8 of 8, even in the rain, it just didn't look good. He just has not maintained or played anywhere close to the level he was at the beginning of the season when people were, he was the favorite. I mean, he was talking about, Baker Mayfield's the MVP and Emeka Ibuka's the leading candidate for Rookie of the Year. Well, now look where they're both at, right? Ibuka is struggling catching the ball. That's going to be something to watch. Everybody's kind of, it's just like being in an elevator and nobody making eye contact. It's like, there's nothing to see here. No, he's fine. No, we don't have any concerns. Well, there should be a concern because I know they're still going to throw the ball to Emeka, but everyone that comes to him, you're going to wonder, is he going to catch it? And so will he. So there are some dynamics, but to get all those guys back on the field, and I don't expect them to be anywhere close to midseason form, even though it's the end of the season because they haven't played. But your defense has to respect it. Your defense has to account for those guys, and sometimes having a lighter box to run the football with Bucky Irving, getting some one-on-ones for guys like Jalen McMillan and Chris Godwin and some of those guys. And then again, Emeka won't necessarily face all that cloud coverage that he's been getting of late. So it could look different and it could make things better for Baker Mayfield because he can identify, sort of what the coverage is and whatnot. But he's got to play better. I think it's the injuries. He will never say this. You'll never hear him complain about it. But I mean, these guys are all beat up. I believe personally that Tristan Wirfs, who has, that kind of abdominal injury that everybody gets, the oblique. I think that's really serious for him right now. He's going to play through this, but my understanding is he's really ripped up, on one side with an oblique. And you guys go out there and they're all playing hurt, but Baker busted up knee. I remember seeing him come off the field in week 2 at Houston. That thing's not gotten better. And then, the oblique, which I think affected him throwing the football. There's no question there were some games I wasn't even sure he was going to play, and I watched him warm up, and he didn't have the velocity. He's gutted it out. And then the left shoulder, which we just tend to think, forget about because it's not his throwing shoulder, but it absolutely affects how he plays. And the accuracy, you can see the completion percentage has dropped. The passer rating is through the bottom. He's got to play at a high level. Any quarterback that wins in this league has to play at a high level to win each week. And we haven't seen that from Baker. So hopefully he can come out with a few more weapons, complete a high volume of passes. He started doing that in that last game. He was 8 for 8, and they went down the field and scored a touchdown. But after that first drive, man, he couldn't hit anybody. And it's not all on him. It's on the receivers. It's on the protection. He looks uncomfortable. He looks uncomfortable in the pocket. He gets some happy feet, gets caught between, flee or fight, kind of thing. Do I stand in here and take a hit, or do I, try to run out, or do I stop while I'm running out and try to find somebody in the open field? Like it's been very disjointed. What you want to see from Baker is, whether it's a 3-step, 5-step, or shotgun, hit that back foot and then the ball comes out. Anything longer than that, you're putting yourself and the football in jeopardy. So that's what I'm going to want. I'm going to be looking to see like how efficient they can be, in the passing game, running the football, stay away from penalties, all that. And then defensively, I got real concerns. I mean, for the starters, we're not going to see Servassier Dennis. That may actually be a good thing because he's not played very well. But you're going to be platooning at the other inside linebacker spot, with Deion Jones and Bullock and those guys. Maybe that works. Maybe Todd Bowles can dial up the right guy for the right situation. I don't think you lose that much without Servassier because his coverage wise, he's been a liability. And so, but you got to replace him. And with Bijan Robinson, man, the easiest thing to do is turn around, hand it to him, throw it to him. I mean, Kirk Cousins, I think they have a chance to get to Cousins, particularly if they can get a lead and he has to throw. He has less mobility than he did a year ago. Just looking at watching some of his games, but he does get the ball out quickly, and he does have some playmakers. Without London, that's going to hurt him a little bit. But Kyle Pitts has hurt this team. Any tight end over the middle of the field has hurt this team. And I think it's going to be a really tough game. Atlanta's a better football team than New Orleans, and of course they just lost to New Orleans. But this is the Bucs. We're going to find out how much fight they have, because they should be in a really ticked off mood. This is their opportunity to erase what happened Sunday. You didn't have to practice all week, but you just got to go out there and let it fly, and then you get kind of a mini bye week after that, and then it's gearing up for the biggest game of your season. Is at Carolina. So this is such a huge game. I don't think the rest of the nation gives a damn about it, to be honest with you. I don't know that I'd turn it on if I didn't have to watch it, but man, it's a big game for the Bucs, because if they lose this, Steve, what does that say? I mean, they've already lost 5 out of 7. You lose 6 out of 8 at this time of the year after Thanksgiving. You're not a contender.
Well,
I mean,
and for a short time, at least, you're in second place.
That's right.
Now,
Absolutely.
Carolina will play this weekend. If they lose, you'll be back in a tie. But for that short time,
so psychologically, that's tough, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you lose and Carolina wins, and I think are they playing New Orleans this weekend?
They're playing New Orleans, yeah. Now they've lost to New Orleans, and it's at New Orleans. Now New Orleans has a little bit of confidence.
And New Orleans just beat the Bucs, so it's not like they can't beat either of these teams. But if the Bucs were to lose and Carolina win, now you're a game behind Carolina.
Game behind.
And granted, this is not a must-win game Thursday night, because, quite frankly, you beat Carolina twice and you've won the division. It doesn't matter what happens in this game.
Same is true with them.
But if you could win this week and say Carolina loses, now you've eased up.
You just need one of the two. Yeah.
Right. So, it's not a must-win game, but psychologically, you've lost 5 of 7 to lose 6 of 8 and possibly be in second place. That's harder to come back from.
It's harder, and then so many other implications. Right now, you're not just talking about a lost season, right, or a collapse like we've seen. Now you're talking about the future of the franchise in terms of who's the head coach. I mean, really, that's what's at stake here, and it is, I guess, every week in the NFL. Sometimes, some coaches lesser than others, just based on what's happened, how long they've been there and whatnot. But now, because I've covered too many teams that I think this team genuinely responds to Todd Bowles. I think they like Todd Bowles. I think they play hard for Todd Bowles. That's what you should look for. Is has anybody given up? I don't think you'll see that as long as Todd is in that chair. But there does become a real uneasy feeling in that locker room and in that front office when it starts to be, we could have a dead man walking. And when I say Todd Bowles, I'm really talking about the entire staff. When you fire a head coach in this league, it's very rare, unless you go from Bruce Arians to Todd Bowles, or you go to Dirk Cutter from Lovie Smith. But it's very rare that all your assistants aren't also fired as well. So you're talking about an entire ecosystem in that building. All those people have been there at least since 2019 for the most part. They're the ones that won a Super Bowl. They were with Bruce Arians. They everybody in the building knows them, and their families have lived here and raised kids here, and so on and so forth. And it's very disruptive. Now, no one cares. They chose the profession to be a head coach. And your families have to make those sacrifices, and there's a lot of rewards. But that's really what you're talking about. It casts sort of a pall over the building a little bit. If all of a sudden it looks like you've got a situation where your coach could end up getting let go. So you want to avoid that. You want to recreate some momentum going into this Carolina game. If you do win the game, that is 2 out of 3. You did have the stumble, obviously, against New Orleans. But if you can win this game and maybe even win it handily, you might have a little momentum, because there's going to be pressure on them too. Here's the thing about the Bucs versus Carolina. Carolina has not been in these pressure games in some time, right? The Bucs have made the playoffs the last few years. They haven't won except one game with Todd Bowles. They're 1-3, but they're used to playing in big games. They've had to beat Carolina on the final game of the season a couple years ago and did so up there in a game that shouldn't have been as close as it was, but Baker was beat up. So how does Carolina respond once they're in the race, right? I tend to think they have momentum and the Bucs don't. That's just the way you look at those two seasons. They're totally opposite, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the momentum, it doesn't always carry over week to week, but losing 5 out of 7, if it becomes 6 out of 8, that weighs on you. And
yeah, it does.
And you've gone from, the great start and several games up in the division to maybe in second place in the division with just 3 weeks to go at that point.
It's something lost already before you've actually technically lost it. You know what I mean? Like, you've given away so much. And I just, I mean, and look, maybe it was fool's gold. Maybe we, people that were writing about it or watching it on TV and extolling Baker Mayfield as an MVP candidate and Abuka as the rookie of the year, they were playing at that level. But in reality, if you don't pick up a 4th and 15 in Houston or 4th and 10 in Houston, you lose that game because and Houston, it turns out, is a really good team. Houston's the hottest team in the NFL right now. If you don't get a missed kick in Atlanta, you lose the opener, right? So I know those games went your way, and losers lament, and to the victor goes the spoils and all that. But NFL games very often come down to one possession, one kick, one conversion, right? And so, there's a little bit of luck involved. Those were closer games than you think. And when you look at the record and you go, well, they're 5-1. Yeah, but they're 5-1 with 4 comebacks in the final minute. And the quarterback, I'll just say it, he played out of his mind in those moments, right? Not for the whole game, but for the most part in those moments. And when you start out with 16 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, you're balling. You're flat out balling, right? And it hasn't been that since. The last month has been rough, right? Really rough on him physically, mentally. And I also think that since about the Detroit game, teams caught up to this offense and what Grizzard was doing. And in particular, what they said was, for the most part, we're not going to let Baker Mayfield run the ball on 3rd down and do the things he does with his feet. Like, we're going to keep a spy. Detroit spied on him. Other teams have followed suit and shut down his running lanes. And for 3 weeks, he didn't want to run the ball because he was hurt. We saw a little bit more of it last week, trying to get out of bounds, try to slide, stuff like that. But he knows that every time he runs with that shoulder, he's putting the rest of the season in jeopardy for himself. So you can't just react, right? You have to think and be careful and, take care of the injuries and things like that. So I think it's the injuries as much as anything, and the lack of trust he has in his offensive line, because Ben Bredesen now is on IR, and that's a huge loss. Not a small loss, a huge loss, because you've already got one backup guard. Now Mike Jordan has to come in and play, and the communication is not where it should be with those guys. Graham Barton's had kind of an up and down year, and so if a quarterback feels like his feet aren't clean, it's hard for him to step up and throw the ball. He's gonna watch the rush, and it's one thing if you get beat on the outside, he can see it and do some stuff, but inside, it's just really difficult to play if you're getting pressure in your face like that. And he's not the biggest quarterback in the world, so I just think that the combination of not trusting your protection. Last week, even though they did a good job of sort of replacing Tristan Wirfs and taking care of what they needed to there with Ben Chukwuma, it still wasn't the same game plan. It's still, Baker still didn't know if his backside was going to be clean or not. And having Wirfs back, I think, will help this week. But all of that, right, plays into it. And your quarterback, the best teams, when Josh Allen plays well, the Bills win. When Patrick Mahomes can function and play well, the Chiefs win. And that's true about every team in this league that wins games, that wins football games. And the Bucs need to, and that's what the irony is that they didn't have their offensive line together and they were still winning games. They were kind of that little team that could. and they've lost that edge. They got to find that edge back. They got to, and maybe, and it's been the pattern in the last 2-3 years, when they get their backs against the wall, this team comes out fighting harder than they normally do when they're front. They're not a front running team. They don't like it out in front. They do not like running ahead of the pack. So, well, get their best shot. It's a to me it's a must win, because of what's coming up in these next 3 weeks after this. And if they don't win it, I don't have much hope for them to win the division. To be honest with you, could it happen? Sure, but I don't think it will. I got some other football news coming up that's pretty interesting, including USF's quarterback's decision not to play in the bowl game. But first, it's Christmas, folks. I know this because I'm staring at my tree right now, and it's got all those pretty lights on it. But you know what it doesn't have? Presents. And I got some ideas for presents for you. It's called Go to Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. You know where Santa is in the center of that mall? Just look upstairs. That's where you're going to find the Breitling Boutique. The Breitling Company, been in business for over 140 years in Switzerland, where they make the best Swiss watches. In Tampa Bay, they've been at International Plaza for going on 6 years now. And go in there. The customer service is terrific. Spend some time, have a drink. Let them tell you about their men's watches, the Chronomats, the Navatimers, women's watches as well. These are sports watches. They're durable, they're beautiful, and she gets to choose from an array of different colored wristbands on top of that. And while supplies last, as you approach the store, look in the window because they have something that says NFL, and that's their NFL collection of watches. And again, it's only while supplies last. 32 different team watches, one for each team in the National Football League. These watches are absolutely stunning. They had the Jaguars and the Bucs watch in the window the last time I was at the mall. So with the Bucs watch, it's a Chronomat watch. It has the team colors as the face of the watch, which is red in this case, a logo inside. These are spectacular looking collector's items. You have to check them out. Also very affordable for the kind of timepiece that you will own, the best one you've ever owned in your life. It is Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. When you go, please let them know you heard about it right here on Sports Day Tampa Bay. So, in some news in college football, where do you want to start? You want to start with USF or Michigan?
We can start with USF if you want. Byrum Brown.
All right, let's stay local. Yeah, Byrum Brown. He's not going to play in a bowl game. Is that right?
He's opting out of playing in the bowl game, but he's going to coach in the bowl game, be an assistant for USF.
Okay.
With the coaching transition, I don't know if this means Byrum's leaving in the transfer portal or going pro, or if he's trying to give more time to see what he wants to do.
Weighing his options, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't know Brian Hartline. He's only been here a couple days. So I think the good news is he's going to be a participant as far as coaching goes or something like that. I think, I don't know how I feel about, first of all, I don't begrudge any player that has a future in the NFL for saying, I'm not going to go out there and risk an injury. And I think Byron is eligible for the draft. I don't know if he's going to come out or not. That might be a decision he's still trying to ponder, as well as I would imagine that there's plenty of schools, when you lose your head coach, teams coming after you, NIL, all of that. But at minimum, it is the cure bowl, right? You'd like to be with your guys, but I don't begrudge a player for not playing in those games. I don't. I do think though that he's definitely. There's definitely a good chance, if this is his mindset, that he's not going to play next year here. I don't know where it'll be, but could be the NFL. But I think that's why you would sit out, as much as anything.
Yeah, I tend to think that whether it's pro or transferring, that's
keep your
his
options
intention
open
at this point. Now,
yeah.
Could that change? Sure.
Yeah. I mean, what could he get on NIL if he went to, say, I don't know, Auburn?
I would think quite a bit.
Right? Yeah, I do too. And reunited with your former. I'm not saying that's what's going on, those chatters, but you can bet that there are plenty of schools out there that would love them a guy who just threw for 3,000 yards and rushed for 1,000 at USF, right? I think there's been, like a dozen quarterbacks that have done that in college football in the past.
Yeah, not many.
So, yeah, it's pretty high air up there. But Yeah, so Byron won't be playing in that, but we'll see. And then Rob Higgins and them put out a statement. They're very upfront about it. I think obviously not condemning him for it, saying that he had agreed to coach, which they're happy about. So that tie has not been severed yet, which is in USF's favor, I think, for sure. The other college football news was stunning, and we're still finding out about it. And Steve, it's a horrible story about your Michigan coach being dismissed for an inappropriate relationship.
Yeah, so he was abruptly fired for cause on Wednesday afternoon. He was
Sherrone
called
Brown,
into a
right?
meeting.
Is that what we're talking
Sherrone,
about?
Sherrone Moore.
Sherrone Moore. Oh, Moore.
Yep.
Why did I say Brown? Yes, Sherrone Moore.
We were just talking about Byrum Brown. That's why.
That would be why. Yeah. I'm confused.
Sherrone Moore, the second-year coach, or just finished his second year at Michigan.
Yeah.
Was an assistant under Harbaugh, of course, and that. But
Mm-hmm.
fired, for an inappropriate relationship with a staffer, and now is in jail tonight. Which makes it even crazier.
Well, he's not only in jail, but he's under some kind of a watch. According to reports, this is an awful story. So he had a relationship with this executive assistant, who, by the way, seems to be considerably younger than his 40-something years or whatever, however old he is, 39, 40 years old. He's married, by the way, with 3 children. I believe they're daughters. Don't quote me on that. But so this affair occurred. The reports are that she became pregnant. And he was wanting to pay for an abortion. But at any rate, this latest news about his arrest, or at least he was taken into custody. I think it was more for his safety and others, because according to reports, he got into some spat with his wife and was brandishing some kind of weapon, and then he went over to his mistress's house and was threatening to harm her and himself at some point. So they took him into custody. It's an awful story. I mean, it's just think about mental health and all the things, and a guy with an opportunity like that. I mean, he was more or less kind of inherited that program from Harbaugh. You know what I mean? I don't know that Michigan would have made him a candidate necessarily. He was also suspended for a couple games because of all that stuff that went on when Jim was there. It's just weird. It's a horrible story. It's a weird story, and not for nothing, but like they've just had a whole hiring cycle of college football coaches, and now the Michigan job might be open.
Well, it is open.
Yeah,
I mean,
apparently.
Biff Poggi is the interim coach. He's not going to be the long.
He's not going to be the head coach. No.
So
now do you try to go to?
But Michigan has the
Alabama,
resources. Michigan has the resources to go get any coach they want.
I suppose they could. I've heard DeBoer from Alabama. I've heard a lot of names.
He's the odds-on favorite. If you look at the betting lines, Jed Fish out in Washington, who was a passing game coordinator at Michigan back about 10 years ago.
Okay, all right.
Brian Kelly, I've heard, is not going to get it. Thank goodness.
What is the Michigan accent he'd have to adapt for that?
Good point. Good point there. Well, he coached in Michigan. What was it? Central Michigan, I think he coached before he went to Cincinnati. It was one of the directional Michigan schools. Yeah. But yeah, it's crazy story. As you know, they have a bowl game still coming up here in Orlando. They're playing at the Cheez-It Bowl. But
it's just awful.
Yeah, it's. Now there's a lot of questions of, apparently this investigation's been going on for a month.
Yeah, I'm wondering why they didn't put him on.
Apparently there's been rumors for years about stuff like this, but
why? I guess I'm curious why they didn't put him on some kind of administrative leave. Apparently there's lots of evidence. I mean, I don't know on the internet these days what you're watching, right, or seeing as far as documents go, but there was some people, and I saw this in several different places, alleging that he had even she was his executive assistant, that he had given her a raise from like $55,000 to $90,000, which is an enormous raise for anybody. But yeah, it's such a, again, does infidelity happen in the workplace? Absolutely, but yeah, it's messy, and then you got the mental health aspect of it, where potentially somebody was taken into custody because of threats they were making to themselves and others. So I don't know. you just you hope everybody's all right in that scenario. They'll never be obviously the same, and he's lost any opportunity that he would have had just to have that happen. Right, you're at the top of college football as far as you're the head coach of the Michigan Wolverines, one of the biggest brands in college football, and then you're certainly not anymore. And I wonder why it took the university this long, or why the action wasn't taken sooner. And maybe the action is what caused his reaction, right? When they finally had the evidence that they needed to make a decision, and that led to sort of what he did by going, and threatening his wife, threatening his mistress, like all that. But it's a horrible story. I don't know. We're going to find out more about it, I'm sure. But
yeah, I mean, right now you just got a few statements, from the university and the police, but the details are, and you're seeing
murky.
so many accounts that are parody accounts,
Parody
putting
accounts,
details out too. I mean, you
I
got to
hate
be
that.
careful who you follow and that.
Yeah, I hate that. A lot of stuff out there looks real and it's not. But man, that's tough.
The good news is Michigan's a basketball school now, since they're number one in the country. And
Here we go.
By the way, their basketball team's a wagon. I mean, it's that they're blowing everybody out by 30 and 40 points,
Easy,
high ranked teams. But
easy.
Hope and their hope for their sake. I hope they didn't peak too early. But
it's only December 10th. I believe they call it March Madness, don't they? We still got a ways to go.
That ends in April.
Yeah, that ends in April, right? I think I might be. We got 2 NCAA semifinals here, maybe, or at least
I think it's first and second round.
First and second round. There you go. Yeah,
yep,
first and second round games in Tampa. So
yeah, Benchmark International Arena.
How about that? Maybe you'll see your Wolverines come down here and play. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah,
you never know. I like doing March Madness. It's one of the things that since my season is in the fall, if there's an event like that, I've helped out on some Final Fours and things like that. It's actually fun. I love college basketball, man. It's great. It's long days, though. Long days when you get
you get 4 games, so it's a huge
tough.
long day. Yeah, for the first 2 rounds, it's a lot.
Try to split them up a little bit. And, of course, the last basketball tournament I did, I'll never forget, because it was the SEC tournament a couple years ago. I believe Tennessee won the championship. I got home and was getting ready to do a podcast with you when I looked at my phone and it said, Tom Brady's coming back. He's going to unretire. Or no, that was his retirement, I believe, the first time, right?
Yes.
I can't remember. Yeah, it was his
no, that would have been coming back, because that would have been
coming back. That's right. He was coming back. It was in March. He was retired for like 40 days, and he was coming back. And I was like, I screamed. They heard me outside in the driveway. I was like, what? So yeah, we were getting ready to do it. Remember, we were talking about.
I do. There's been a lot of those instances where
either
we're getting ready to do it, or we did one early and then crap.
Yeah, we got it. Well, forget that one. We got to rip that one up. Do something. Newsflash. But so hopefully no news will break tonight about the Bucs beat. But if it does, we'll let you know. But yeah, that was fun. So you college basketball, might get to see your Wolverines. That'd be good. All right, we got time for maybe just a quick question or two before we wrap it up before the Thursday night football game.
Sure. We got John wrote us. He sent you an email. It says all touchdowns in the 2020 Super Bowl were scored by free agents. Gronk 2, Antonio Brown 1, Fournette 1. I will correct him. Gronk was a trade, but the point stands.
Yeah.
The defensive line performance versus Mahomes, all free agents. Ndamukong Suh, JPP, and Shaq Barrett. What did the draftees do? This draft-only mindset won't win the game's biggest prize.
Yeah, I mean, look, when Tom Brady showed up, they spent a lot of money. And I think Tom had a trust. Obviously, the Gronk was a trade. I think he only decided to come out of retirement for Tom Brady. Leonard Fournette was somebody he asked for, and Lenny didn't do anything for most of the season until he became playoff Lenny, and then Lombardi Lenny. He was nearly cut. You're going to see that in the Bucs docuseries that came out on Amazon Prime today. Yeah, which is terrific. And then, they spent well over the cap, and in fact, they paid for that for about 2 to 3 years after Brady left. So it was a one-off because of who their quarterback was. They knew they had a small window. They had to capitalize on it. But I would agree that I still think you always want to try to build your team. Everybody says this. Well, we want to draft and develop. Well, who doesn't, right? I mean, free agency is expensive. And oh, by the way, the bust rate in free agency is just about as bad as it is in the draft. You'll go 50% with free agents too. So it's not, Sometimes sometimes you're using free agency to cover up the mistakes you had in the draft, right? You want to use it to kind of buttress certain positions, but sometimes you have to get I have to have an edge rusher, I have to have a tight end, or I have to have, because you've been unable to draft anybody and develop them. So don't get fooled by whether your team, if your team is drafting, developing, and doesn't have to sign any free agents. Believe me, that's the way to go. Because free agents are going to go where the money is. You're going to have to overpay sometimes these guys. Having said that, yes, but I would also say that for every Gronk, and there was an Antoine Winfield Jr. at that time. There was a Carlton Davis. There was a Jamel Dean, who made plays. There was uh, Devin White, who was maybe one of their MVPs during that time. Levante David. So let's not act as if they didn't draft anybody. And Domicon, and not in Domicon Sue, but Vita Vea, was a big part of that. And you can go on and on with the offensive line, Ali Marpet, and just all these players that they had drafted on the offensive line. So I know what you're saying. I think you have to do both. And for the Bucs part, free agency, they have not dipped into it. I think the reason was that after Brady left, they were some $80 million over the cap, $70, $80 million. They could not go the free agent route. That's why in the last 3 drafts, damn near every player they picked has made the team, rounds 1 through 7 practically. So that's a financial thing as much as it is a preference, right? But I do think that they need to augment that, because he's right. One of the weak spots that Jason Light has had, and it's not unique to him, but trying to draft an edge rusher. They haven't spent a lot of draft, but you use a second rounder on Braswell, hasn't worked out, right? So then he went the free agent route this year, and he went after Hassan Reddick for $14 million. Well, guess what? 1.5 sacks later and a bunch of missed games, Hassan Reddick wasn't the answer, right? And he's a free agent. So it's not just throwing money at free agency. You got to get the right guys. They hit it out of the park with Shaq Barrett. They made the trade for JPP. Those were just, perfect acquisitions at the time. And that's what you hope to have, but you're not always going to do that, So right now it's a young team. They needed to get younger. That means you need to keep your draft picks. And oh, by the way, when you do that, free agency is expensive. It's expensive now. And if you want Mike Evans back, if you want Chris Godwin back, if you want Luke Gedeke back, if you want Zion McCollum back, like you're going to have to not spend a ton of money on free agency. It's an allocation system. You don't have money for people outside your organization and being able to keep the guys that you've drafted and they have played well, and you don't want to lose them. Same is true with the Tristan Wirfs. You can go sign a bunch of free agents and lose Tristan Wirfs to free agency. That's not going to make your club better. So I just think they got to do a better job for sure in free agency, and for that matter, at certain positions in the draft. Their defense, other than the back end, I mean, I still think Winfield can play, but he has not been the player that they signed to the highest, richest defensive back contract in history at the time. He's not been that guy. The last 2 years, a year ago he was hurt. This year he hadn't made any plays. He's got 1 interception, maybe a fumble recovery or something like that, but he just hasn't made any plays. And that's that's shocking, right? Like, you need that dude to make some plays. And the same is true with Reddick, or the same is true with Zion McCollum got the big contract. His play has gone the wrong way. He's had a bad year. And you want those guys that you reward to, keep the pedal to the metal, and it hasn't happened. So just throwing money at the problem doesn't always do it, but I do agree that it has to be a combination. It can't be all the draft or all free agency. And these guys have struck out at certain positions, and they got to get better. They got to get better at all of that. And but yeah, could a player or two? But look at it's interesting. Like in the Super Bowl, you think about when the Bucs won it. The guys who scored touchdown, Gronk had 2, and Antonio Brown had 1, right? Touchdown passes, and Leonard Fournette ran for 1.
Mm-hmm.
They were all free agents. and they're all Brady guys, you know.
Yep.
So, I mean, but there was an awful lot of, and then Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul chased Patrick Mahomes all over the damn field. But you had Devin White, who was playing at a high level, and you had Antoine Winfield Jr., who came in as a rookie and was playing his butt off, and you still had, some guys that you had drafted. That offensive line with Ali Marpet and those guys were really, really good. I know Ryan Jensen was a free agent. So it's got to be a combination. And the reason they don't have the free agents right now is because it took them 2 or 3 years to dig out of that salary cap mess. And the way you do it is you keep your draft picks. You build as much as you can through the draft and undrafted rookie free agents. And that's primarily what this team is.
All right, Cliff sent an email. It says 2 thoughts after listening to the podcast this morning. First, JPP should absolutely get a helmet for Thursday, and it should be Chris Braswell's helmet. Maybe a taste of what it's like to not be an NFL player would get Braswell to step up his game. Second, I can't believe there isn't an inside linebacker on a practice squad in Canada, in the UFL, or on the couch somewhere that isn't better than Servassier Dennis. I know a new guy would have to learn the system, fit in the locker room, and all the rest, but Dennis has been a liability since week 1, and a new guy couldn't be worse. Hope you both enjoy the holidays.
Thanks. We will. Well, with Dennis, we're going to find out, if somebody is better because he's not playing. He's going to be inactive for this game. Had a hip injury. You're going to see a platoon situation with Deion Jones, who I suspect will play on sure passing downs because his skills are best suited for coverage, even though he dropped an interception that might have helped him come back the other day. And then I think you'll see John Bullock and some other, Nick what's his name? Phew, I forgot his name. The other young linebacker will be up as well, so they'll platoon that position. It's the inside linebacker position has let them down in a big way, and nobody loves Levante David more than me. I think he's a Hall of Fame player. I think he has a real chance of getting there in a few years. Won't be a first ballot guy, but longevity, the amount of plays he's made, the amount of tackles, tackles for losses, fumbles, fumble recoveries, all of that, he deserves it. I think his numbers will stack up against a lot of people. But at this stage, he's been year to year now for the last several years. And when they brought him back on a 1-year deal at age 34, soon to be 35, I was like, yeah, the bottom line is that, it's undefeated, man. I mean, Father Time gets us all. And he beat Father Time for the longest time. I think the difference is that while Levante can make plays based on his recognition of things, on his savvy, it can make up for some of the lack of physical ability, like his speed, right? You definitely can't run the way he used to. But when you have somebody next to him who's not playing well, right, who doesn't play fast, who doesn't make plays, Levante was the great eraser. Like, Devin White would guess wrong and be like a bat out of hell, and Levante David would cover his backside and make the tackle, and it might be a first down, but it wasn't a touchdown. Now these things are going to the house, because he can't get there, and you're getting coverage mistakes and missed tackles and open field tackles by Servassier Dennis. So it's sort of exposed Levante a little bit, at this stage of his career. No fault of his own. It just, he is what he is. He's a 35-year-old player. And when I saw him trying to, trying to stop the run the other day and chase after, Tyler Shuck and those guys, he reminded me a lot of Derek Brooks in his final year, in his final game against the Raiders, and chasing Michael Bush through the end zone. Kind of had that limpy gait, was never going to get there kind of thing. And that's a good guy to be compared to, is Derek Brooks. Trust me, first ballot Hall of Fame player. But no one can defeat Father Time, and I think you've seen it with Levante, and it's glaring now a little bit more than it usually was, simply because he doesn't have that guy next to him that's youthful and can run and be a complement to his ability and his playmaking ability, and let him do what he does. But we'll see what happens after this year. Look, it's not going to get any better because I'm a firm believer that Savasier Dennis, while he may not have played very well, I'm convinced that Bowles is convinced he gives them the best chance to win. Now, everybody gets their opportunity in football the same way. Either the guy in front of you gets hurt or he's ineffective and you get to take a rep and you can prove what it is you can do. And so some of those guys are going to get a chance to do that. Deion Jones has been around this league for years. He is who he is. I think from a coverage standpoint, he'll be better. But also another guy that's not as fast as he used to be at one point, into his 30s now. So we'll see how they hold up. It's going to be interesting. But all these guys, this is their dream. I always say this, like, the last guy on the roster, they call him an NFL player. He's still one of the best in the world, in the freaking world. And they all dream of this opportunity. When they get it, some of them are ready to seize it and can make a name for themselves. And there's players all over this league that weren't drafted, that have taken advantage of that. And so we're going to see a couple of young guys, I think, tonight that, we'll seize that by the horns and maybe make a play or two. This is their chance to shine. So as much as, when you're missing a starter, you go, oh man, it's going to be it's also, you got to get excited. I think coaches get excited, players get excited because they know how much work those guys have put in all year. And now this is their big chance, right? They've got people in the seats watching their NFL debut and watching them get playing time on the big stage and on Thursday Night Football. So a lot of times somebody steps up and shines. It could be fun. All right, so we got Thursday Night Football. Of course, tonight you can watch that game on Fox 13 if you do not have the streaming service. So it is broadcast locally since it is in Tampa, Florida. And do that. Make sure you get down to Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. It's Christmas season, man. They got it decorated beautifully in there. And you're going to find a timepiece for your wife, your girlfriend, your husband, you name it. It's Breitling Boutique, International Plaza. Let them know you heard about it here on Sports Day Tampa Bay. For Steve Versnick,
don't forget the Lightning tonight, too. Lightning play at the Devils. A little bit before 7 o'clock, a little bit before the Monday night or Thursday night football game. So.
Catch a little bit of Lightning, and then Thursday night comes on, and a little doubleheader there. Lightning coming off a big win.
Yeah, have your two screens going. So
nice. Yeah, I got that. Except I won't be here to watch it, but I could do it. But maybe I'll flip back and forth. I can do it on my phone. It's kind of cool. I got the little Spectrum app and kind of go back and forth. So, yeah, big night for Tampa Bay sports. Hope you guys enjoy it. For Steve Versnick, thanks for listening. I'm Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times. Have a great day, everybody.